February 23rd, 1685, to the town surgeon of Halle, Germany, and he was supposed to study law, but under no account was he to be a musician. His name was George Frederick Handel. Frederick's father was one of the finest surgeons in Germany, and in fact was court surgeon to Prince Augustus. He was a wealthy man who was always very busy making money, and he had no use for music or musicians at all. His son was to make even more money for the Handel family. Musicians sang at church, or they played on an organ, but certainly they did not make money. But when Frederick went to church on Sunday and heard the choirs and the organ, he became very excited and made the mistake of telling his father. The good man could hardly believe his ears. Study music? His son? Once he was heard to say, "If that boy ever shows the first inclination to study music, I will kill him." As can well be imagined, Frederick had to study music in secret. His mother, whom he always loved, helped some, but it was his dear Aunt Anna who really helped the most. She even smuggled a clavichord into the house right under his father's nose. When he was of age, Frederick's father put him in the Halle grammar school. From Frederick's point of view, nothing could have been better, because unknown to his father, the school teacher loved music, and seeing great talent in the youth, encouraged it. It wasn't long after this that Frederick and his father took a coach ride to the court of Prince Augustus at Weissenfels. Frederick impressed everyone there with his youthful knowledge and charm. What's more important, it gave Frederick a chance to hear more music. The organ especially impressed him, and it may have been here that he got some of his first ideas for the great organ concerti of a few years hence. Frederick would go to hear the organist practice, and even began to practice himself. One Sunday, a particularly fine organ voluntary was being played, and the prince glanced around to look at the organist. He was amazed to see that it was none other than George Frederick. As can be imagined, his father was enraged, but the prince told him, "Your son has talent. I insist on paying for his education." And the prince wouldn't take no for an answer, no matter how Handel Sr. spluttered. He was thoroughly disgusted with his good-for-nothing son, but he took him back to Halle and placed him in the hands of Wilhelm Zachow, the organist of the Liebfrauenkirche. Zachow turned out to be a wonderful teacher. Why, he practically adopted Frederick into his family. But the boy had to work hard. He wrote a new church service every single week. In 1696, at the age of 11, Frederick left for the royal court in Berlin. Berlin was the center of music in Europe in that day, and the young boy made an immediate impression on the elector and electress with his vast talent. Soon, Frederick's father received a letter from the elector asking him to allow Frederick to go to Italy at the elector's expense to study. But this time his father had had enough. Frederick was ordered back to Halle. It wasn't long after that his father died. Handel had his hands full with taking care of the household, and for 5 long years was unable to study music. Then he entered Halle University and got his first big chance. The chapel attached to the university needed an organist, and Handel was asked to take the position. He learned a lot in this position, but he soon tired of it and set out to seek his fortune in Hamburg. Hamburg boasted a really good opera house, and it was opera Frederick wanted to hear and write. But there were other diversions too. He met a young man named Johann Mattheson, who was to be a friend for life. Mattheson had heard that the town of Lübeck was seeking an organist to replace Buxtehude, who had died recently. So the two set out to see if they could get the job. But they found out that the man who got the position also had to marry Buxtehude's daughter. One look was enough. Back they came to Hamburg. Handel was now playing violin at the Hamburg Opera and had a large number of pupils. He was beginning to attract some attention. A well-known poet, Christian Postel, wrote a libretto for him to set to music. It was a passion according to St. John, and young Handel set eagerly to work. Unfortunately, it wasn't very successful, but it did have one interesting effect. It made Mattheson jealous. The relations between the two became strained. Mattheson, who besides playing the organ, composed and sang, wrote an opera, Cleopatra, which was successfully performed. Now it was Handel's turn to be jealous. He was supposed to play the harpsichord during most of the opera, but when Mattheson was finished with his part on stage, Handel was supposed to give up his seat at the harpsichord to him. One night, he refused to budge. Soon, blows were being exchanged, to the delight of the audience. Later, on the street outside, the two angry men faced each other with drawn swords. Only a miracle could prevent disaster. Mattheson lunged at Handel's heart. His sword hit a brass button and snapped off. The two stood looking at each other for a second in amazement, then fell into each other's arms. That was the end of their jealousy. Soon, Handel scored with two big operas, Elmira and Nero. In fact, he was becoming so successful that the very impresario who had hired him became afraid of his position. Besides opera, Handel tried his hand at writing sonatas for the recorder, a sort of forerunner of the flute. By the time he met the Italian prince, Gaston de' Medici, Handel was thoroughly sickened by the intrigue in Hamburg, and when de' Medici suggested that he should go to Italy to study, Handel jumped at the chance. He had no money, no possibility of a position in Italy, and as a matter of fact, didn't speak a word of Italian, but off he went. As soon as he arrived in Florence, he began making contacts, and it wasn't long before he had a position and money in his pocket. He met Alessandro Scarlatti, Corelli, and many other famous Italian musicians. He was writing opera again, too, Rodrigo, which was a fair success. He made friends with Alessandro Scarlatti's son, Domenico. He traveled to Rome, to Venice. He saw everything there was to see and learned everything there was to learn. In Rome, he wrote music that attracted the favorable attention of the powerful Cardinal Ottoboni. In Venice, he produced his best opera to date, Agrippina. It was well received, and among the audience was Prince Ernest of Hanover, who fell in love with the work and expressed great admiration for its composer. The prince was eager to acquire Handel's services, and Handel was tired of Italy anyhow. So back to Hanover he went to become the prince's Kapellmeister, or music director. No sooner was Handel installed in his new position than he set out for London. Again, with no contacts, no money, and without being able to speak English. In no time at all, Handel had a new opera, Rinaldo, produced. It was a big, in fact, an enormous success. But at the end of the season, back Handel went to his duties at Hanover. But his mind was on England. He had liked the audiences. They had liked him. He had liked England. Maybe he should go back. No sooner said than done. He applied for a brief leave of absence and set out for England.